Imagine walking onto a plane after years of fighting your way to the top, only to find your seat taken by someone who looks you up and down and decides you don't belong. No shouting, no chaos, just a quiet cut one that slices deeper than anyone around you realizes. That's what happened to Dr. Liana Mercer, a black billionaire CEO, a woman who built satellites and reshaped aviation. Yet, in that moment, she was treated like she didn't deserve C1A. And here's the shocking twist. The real conflict wasn't the stolen seat, but the decision she had to make next. Should she stay silent to keep the peace? Or stand firm knowing it could cost her time or privacy, and maybe even her dignity? If it were you, in that aisle, with your worth questioned so casually, would you speak up, or would you shrink? Yourself, just to get through the day, take a breath. Feel that question. And when you're ready, walk with me into a story about power, prejudice, and the quiet courage it takes just to hold your place in the world. Before we begin, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel so more people can hear stories that matter. The morning light in Dallas had a strange way of softening everything it touched. It settled on the windows of Dallas Fort Worth International Airport, like a warm breath blurring the edges of hurried travelers and the endless hum of rolling suitcases. It made the world look gentler than it truly was. Dr. Liana Mercer stood quietly near the giant floor-to-ceiling windows of Terminal C, hands wrapped around a paper cup of steaming black coffee. The cup was warm against her palms, grounding her in a familiar way that reminded her of long nights at her family's small home in Atlanta. Her mother still awake, grading papers, her father wiping engine grease off his hands after a double shift at a local repair hangar. The world often saw Liana as a prodigy, a rising star, a billionaire tech visionary. But mornings like this, they made her feel like just another traveler watching aircraft rise into the pale Texas sky. She liked that feeling. It was rare for her these days. Still, she could sense something peculiar in the air, a heaviness like the day was quietly warning her. You're gonna need all your calm today. She breathed in slowly. The smell of coffee, jet fuel, and disinfectant floated around her, an unofficial perfume of American airports. Behind her, someone argued over baggage fees. A toddler screeched because he wanted a pretzel for breakfast. A business executive walked past her, talking too loudly into his Bluetooth headset about a missed deal. Just another morning, just another crowd, just another travel day. At least that's what she hoped. Liana lifted her wrist to check the time. 8:04 a.m. Still early. Her flight, Sky America Airlines flight SA-227 heading nonstop to Chicago O'Hare, wouldn't board for another 20 minutes. That gave her enough time to finish her coffee and take one last look at the notes for her upcoming presentation. In less than 6 hours, she would be standing in front of the Federal Aviation Safety Committee in Chicago, presenting Helios Aerospace Systems' newest breakthrough, a multi-layered predictive navigation AI capable of reducing mid-air incidents by nearly 40%. If they approved it today, her company would immediately move into government-backed testing across 15 states. A deal worth billions, a future worth even more, and a responsibility she never took lightly. But for all the pressure, all the expectations, the fame that had begun clinging to her name like static, Liana preferred simplicity. Gray hoodie, dark jeans, comfortable sneakers, hair tied back in a clean low bun, a backpack instead of a designer tote despite being able to buy 1,000 of them without blinking. She dressed like someone who wanted to move quietly through life, not like a woman. Forbes called the aerospace Cinderella of the 21st century. She sipped her coffee and let her gaze drift outside the windows. A Sky America Boeing 787 glided across the tarmac like a giant silver bird. She always paused when she watched aircraft move. Still the same girl who grew up watching her dad inspect wings, check engines, whisper to her airplanes are alive in their own way. They talk if you listen close enough. A small smile flickered across her face. She wondered what he would think if he knew how far she had come. Would he still look at her like the little girl obsessed with metal and sky? Or would he finally see her as the woman the world now saw? Maybe both. A boarding announcement played overhead, and Liana instinctively glanced at the screens again. Her flight still sat at gate C-17 listed as on time. That was good. She needed every minute she could get today. She took a slow breath and opened her laptop, and that's when the first whisper of trouble came. It started small, just a pair of lingering glances from an older couple walking past her. The woman nudged the man, motioning subtly toward Liana's hoodie backpack and economy coffee cup. Liana could read lips. Years of practice. She's standing in the priority area. She probably walked to the wrong section. No, look, she's not with anyone. She can't be first class. Liana fought the gentle ache that bloomed in her chest. Not anger, not even annoyance. Just a quiet, familiar kind of tiredness. The kind you feel when you've lived this scene too many times. Not for the success you earned, not for the life you built, but for the skin you were born in. She looked away, inhaled deeply, and reminded herself. You have bigger things to worry about today. But the universe wasn't done yet. Another woman, mid-40s, sharply dressed in a navy pantsuit, checked her own boarding pass before glancing pointedly at Liana. Her brows pinched. Then came the forced smile, the condescending tilt of the head. The kind of expression that always meant, "Sweetie, you must be lost." Liana didn't return the smile. Instead, she collected her laptop, slipped it back into her backpack, and walked calmly, purposefully toward gate C-17. She stood in the short priority line waiting quietly, watching the digital display above the gate agent flash Flight SA-227, Dallas DFW Chicago Award. Boarding in 10 minutes, a man behind her, white silver-haired, wearing a Rolex that caught too much light, cleared his throat. Miss Economy isn't boarding yet. Liana exhaled through her nose. She didn't turn around, but when she did, her voice was gentle, calm, controlled. Thank you. I'm in the right line. The man blinked, confused. Then his eyes drifted to her hoodie again, suspicious. But he didn't say more. Liana ignored the unease tightening in her stomach. She knew the signs. She recognized this pattern. She could feel the story slowly pulling itself into place, as if the day had already decided how it would unfold. A woman stepped beside Liana, dragging a designer suitcase, and wearing diamond-studded sunglasses even though they were indoors. She looked Liana up and down. A thin, amused smirk curved her lips. Sky America really lets anyone into the priority lane now, huh? Liana didn't answer. She didn't flinch. But inside, something small shifted. Not enough to hurt, just enough to warn her. This is not going to be a quiet morning. The gate agent finally approached the mic. Sky America Flight SA-227 to Chicago will begin pre-boarding in just a moment. First class and our Diamond Elite members will be invited to board shortly. The woman beside Liana scoffed softly. Well, this should be interesting. Liana folded her hands around her boarding pass. Seat 1A, the window seat she booked weeks in advance. The seat she needed to get work done in peace before a presentation. She centered her breath, counted slowly to 4. Let the moment pass. The boarding door opened, and somewhere deep inside her, the uneasy feeling grew. Today was going to test her, in ways she didn't expect, in ways she wasn't asking for. But she also knew one thing about herself. She had survived worse. She would survive this too, and she hadn't even stepped on the plane yet. Boarding for Flight SA-227 hadn't even begun yet. The atmosphere around Gate C-17 already carried a subtle tension, one that Liana recognized not because it was loud or dramatic, but because it was familiar. The kind of tension that wrapped itself around her life in small, invisible threads. Tension that had a color, a temperature, a memory. She shifted her backpack slightly on her shoulder and stepped aside to let a young mother pass. The woman gave her a grateful smile while struggling to balance a toddler on one hip and a bag of snacks in the other. Thank you, the woman breathed out. Liana returned the smile softly. Small acts of kindness still mattered. In a country that often felt too fast, too sharp, too divided, moments like this gave her hope, thin but real. Behind her, someone muttered again. A voice that sounded annoyed, impatient. She's still standing in the priority lane. Unreal. Liana tried not to look. She tried not to feel. But judgment had a way of slipping under the skin, even for someone who had learned to grow a thicker one. She stepped closer to the window, watching ground crew in neon vests move around the aircraft. The hum of machinery, the clatter of carts, the faint smell of jet fuel. She'd grown up around these sounds. Swept hangar floors with her father, held flashlights for him while he checked turbine blades, memorized the rhythm of impact wrenches. She loved airports. She loved planes. She loved sky. That's what made mornings like this complicated. It wasn't the stairs. It wasn't the assumptions. It was the way they layered themselves over memories, good ones like dust. A group of businessmen walked by. One pointed subtly with his chin. Do you think she's standby? No way, she's first class. Maybe an upgrade mistake. Or, she's trying to board early. A cold stir prickled across Liana's neck. She told herself she didn't care. She told herself she'd lived with worse assumptions. She reminded herself that she had a billion-dollar company and a government contract waiting for her in Chicago. But the truth was simpler. She was tired. Tired in a way that didn't show in her posture. Tired in a way that didn't reach her face. Tired in a way that curled up inside her ribs and whispered, "Why does it still have to be like this?" Her phone buzzed a reminder. Meeting with committee at 2:30 p.m. CST. Projected arrival 1218 p.m. Margin for delay minimal. Minimal. The words sat heavy. This flight had to be smooth. No delays. No chaos. No unforeseen drama. She closed her eyes for a moment, letting the cool air from the vent above the gate brush across her face. But life had always thrown challenges at her when she least wanted them. Like it was testing her resolve, testing her patience, testing the quiet strength she tried so hard to protect. Boarding Group 1 was announced. A wave of motion rippled through the waiting area. A few people rose, checked their watches, straightened their jackets, adjusted their suit bags. The woman in the navy pantsuit, whom Liana had noticed earlier, slipped in front of her with a stiff, dismissive expression. Liana kept breathing evenly, one moment at a time. When the line moved, she walked forward and handed her boarding pass to the gate agent, a middle-aged man with a kind smile, weary eyes, and a lanyard full of airline pins. "Good morning," he said with that customer service warmth worn down by years of travel seasons. "Morning," Liana replied softly. He scanned her ticket, his eyebrows lifted. "Ah, seat 1A. That's one of the best in the cabin." He smiled. "Enjoy your flight, Miss Mercer." Liana offered a polite nod and stepped through the door toward the boarding tunnel. Behind her, someone whispered in surprise, "Wait, she's actually first class." Liana ignored it. She walked down the jet bridge with a steady stride, feeling the subtle vibration of the air system beneath her feet. The tunnel lights flickered slightly, a wavering glow that made the metallic walls feel almost alive. Halfway down, a memory flickered across her mind. Her mother's voice, "Baby, don't let the world push you out of the spaces you belong in." Her father's voice right after, "But don't let it change your heart either." She carried both inside her like compass points. At the plane door, a young flight attendant greeted passengers with a perfectly practiced smile. "Welcome aboard Sky America Flight 227 to Chicago." His name tag read Ryan Alden. Liana returned the smile with a quiet nod and stepped into the first-class cabin. She loved the look of it, the soft glow of the lights, the wide leather seats, the sense of calm before the rush. There was something comforting about the layout, something familiar. But the comfort shattered the moment she reached her row. Seat 1A, her seat was not empty. A woman sat there. A woman who felt like a mirror opposite of Liana in every way. Fair-skinned, dressed in an immaculate cream blazer, a pearl necklace resting elegantly against her collarbone. Margaret Maggie Rowland. Though Liana didn't know her name, yet she recognized the type instantly. Entitled, comfortable, certain the world bent for her. Her designer handbag sat proudly on seat 1B, as if claiming territory. She tapped something quickly on her phone, perfectly manicured nails flashing under the cabin lights. Liana hesitated, checked her boarding pass, looked at the placard above the suite 1A. Her breath caught not in fear, not in shock, but in an emotion that hovered somewhere between disbelief and resignation. She stepped closer. "Excuse me," she said gently. "I believe this is my seat." The woman didn't look up right away. She finished her text, smoothed her hair, adjusted her sunglasses, even though they served no purpose inside the dim cabin. Then finally, she glanced at Liana. It wasn't a neutral look, or a curious look. It was the kind of look that measured a person in half a second and dismissed them even faster. "Yes," the woman said. Her tone was sharp, crisp, and dipped in condescension. Liana lifted her boarding pass slightly. "My seat is 1A." The woman blinked slowly, her expression dripping amusement. like someone watching a child do something adorably misguided. "Oh, honey," she said, a smirk curving her lips. "I think you're confused." A quiet thud settled in Liana's chest. Confused. She'd designed entire aircraft navigation frameworks. She'd helped rewrite federal air safety protocols. She'd been on more flights this year than some pilots. But no, this woman didn't see any of that. She saw the hoodie, the sneakers, the skin. "I'm not confused," Liana answered softly. "My pass says 1A. The woman sighed dramatically, as if profoundly inconvenienced. "Well, mine says 1B, but I need the window. I always take the window. It's better lighting, and I have work to do." Liana's fingers tightened slightly around her boarding pass. "I understand, but this is still my seat." The woman tilted her head, studying Liana again with that same judgmental gaze. "Sweetheart," she said, voice dropping into a slow, patronizing drawl. "First class isn't exactly first come, first served for everyone. Maybe the gate agent printed something wrong. Just sit over there." She gestured vaguely toward the other side of the cabin. Liana inhaled, then exhaled. Slow, steady, grounding. It wasn't anger filling her chest. It was that tired ache again. The one she thought she'd left behind with childhood but somehow followed her into every airport, every boardroom, every space where people looked before they listened. She forced a calm smile. "No. I booked this seat. 1A is mine." The woman scoffed. "Well, we'll see about that." And with that, she waved her perfectly manicured hand, like swatting away an inconvenience, and bent back over her phone. Liana stood still, her breath quiet but unwavering. She could already feel the storm forming, and she knew this was only the beginning. For a moment, the cabin seemed to pause around Liana, like the air itself was holding its breath waiting for her reaction. She stood still, backpack slung over one shoulder, boarding pass in hand, and met the cold, familiar weight of a stranger's arrogance. Her seat 1A was occupied. Her patience, already thin from the morning, was being tested, and her day, one that needed to go smoothly, had begun to tilt. Liana drew a quiet breath and tried again. "Ma'am," she said gently, "I really do need you to check your boarding pass. This is my assigned seat." The woman, Margaret Maggie Rowland, lowered her sunglasses just enough for Liana to see her eyes. They were a pale, sharp blue, the kind of eyes that often carried the assumption of authority. Maggie remained seated, posture, relaxed, chin tilted up, as if she were being inconvenienced by something trivial. "Oh, for heaven's sake," Maggie muttered. She dug into her designer tote bag papers, rustling dramatically before she retrieved her boarding pass. She glanced at it. Just once. Just long enough to confirm what Liana already knew. Then she stuffed the pass back into her bag without letting Liana see it. "It says 1B," Maggie admitted, waving her hand flippantly. "But I always sit in the window. It's better for my skin, and I don't do cramped spaces. So you'll be fine in the aisle." She said it with the same tone someone might use when offering leftover crumbs. Liana blinked. Her heart didn't race. Her voice didn't sharpen. But inside her chest, something warm and low uncoiled, a mixture of disappointment and quiet disbelief. She glanced toward the aisle. A few other first-class passengers had started to notice the tension. Some looked away quickly. Some watched openly. Others exchanged glances that said, without words, "Here we go again." Liana lifted her chin slightly. "I'm sorry," she replied softly, "but I won't be taking another seat. I booked 1A for a reason." Maggie gave a sharp, incredulous laugh. "A reason? You need a reason to sit in one? A sweetheart, everyone here has a reason. Some of us have meetings in Chicago that actually matter." The implication stung. Not because of its content, but because of its casual delivery. There were moments racism wore a mask, and moments it didn't bother trying. Before Liana could reply, a voice cut in from behind her. "Is everything okay up here?" It was Ryan Alden, the young flight attendant who'd greeted her at the door. His smile, polite and strained, flickered nervously between the two women. Maggie turned toward him, instantly shifting from dismissive to aggrieved in a single breath. "Oh, thank God," she said loudly, touching her chest as if shaken. "This young woman is insisting that I move even though I'm already settled. And with my back issues, I really shouldn't be shuffling around." Liana's brow furrowed. Back issues. She'd strutted into the cabin like someone late to a charity gala. Ryan's smile grew tighter. He looked at Liana. May I see your boarding pass, ma'am? Liana handed it to him without a word. He scanned it. His eyes darted to the overhead seat map, then back to the boarding pass. Oh, yes. You are assigned to 1A, he confirmed softly. And Miss Rowland, you are assigned to 1B. Maggie waved her hand again, impatient. The system is wrong. Or there was a mix-up or something. But I'm already settled, and she can sit anywhere else. The word "she can sit anywhere else" landed heavily. Ryan hesitated. He looked at Maggie, at her expensive clothes, her commanding, entitled expression, her status, her confidence. Then he looked at Liana, plain hoodie, simple backpack, calm face, quiet posture, and right there Liana saw it. The moment he made a decision. The wrong one. Ma'am, Ryan said softly to Liana, I know you paid for 1A, but the flight is full and moving. Miss Rowland could delay boarding. Would you be willing to switch to 1C? It's still a nice seat. I'll bring you champagne or anything you need for the inconvenience. The words hit like a dull blow. Not loud, not cruel, but deeply disappointing. Liana stared at him, her voice quiet. You're asking me to move from the seat I paid for, even though the error isn't mine. Ryan swallowed, cheeks flushing with embarrassment. I'm just trying to avoid a scene, he murmured. Maggie raised an eyebrow, satisfaction flickering like a spark across her face. Yes, let's not make a big deal of this. She'll be just fine where you put her. Liana felt something inside her chest shift. Not break, no. She'd spent years reinforcing those walls. But something tilted like a book, falling slightly off a shelf. She closed her eyes for a brief moment. In that tiny sliver of silence, she heard echoes. Her father's voice steady, patient, hold your ground, baby girl. Engines work because they stay balanced. Her mother's voice warm but firm. Kindness doesn't mean letting people walk over you. She opened her eyes again. Her breath was calm, her hands steady, but her resolve, that was steel. No, she said. Just one word. Quiet, clear, unmoving. Ryan blinked. No, he repeated. No, she said again. I won't move. I booked 1A. I'm sitting in 1A. Maggie scoffed loudly. Oh, for goodness sake, she snapped. This is ridiculous. I am a Diamond Elite member. I spend more in a week on flights than she probably makes in months. Just sit her somewhere else. The people around them stiffened. A man 2 rows back lowered his newspaper. A woman across the aisle paused mid-email. Even the cabin air felt heavier. Liana stayed calm. This isn't about upgrades or status, she said softly. This is about respecting assignments. And people. Maggie rolled her eyes dramatically. Oh, please. Stop making this some kind of moral crusade. Liana didn't flinch. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't let her expression shift. But her words were steady as stone. If someone took your seat, she said gently, would you move? Maggie opened her mouth, then closed it. Ryan's jaw tightened. He glanced at the boarding door where more passengers were waiting to enter, and panic flickered across his face. Please, he whispered to Liana, just help me out here. A delay will make corporate furious with us. And then, the moment that changed the room, Maggie leaned back, crossed her legs, and said loudly, people like her should be grateful they're even in this cabin. Silence. Immediate. Total. Every ear that had been half listening was now fully tuned in. Liana didn't gasp, didn't stiffen, didn't let the words show their sting. But inside, deep inside, something old and painful stirred. A 13-year-old memory resurfaced. A middle school teacher telling her maybe advanced math just isn't for girls like you. She swallowed once slow. Then she spoke, measured, deliberate. Get the cabin manager, she said quietly. Ryan froze. Ma'am, now, Liana said, still calm, still gentle, but with a firmness that vibrated like a steel cable pulled taut. Maggie laughed sharply. Oh, wonderful. She's emotional now. But Liana wasn't emotional. She was steady, controlled, dangerously calm. Because she knew this was no longer about a seat. It was about dignity. And she wasn't giving hers up. Not today. Not ever. For a few seconds after Liana asked for the cabin manager, nothing happened. The air inside the first-class cabin felt thick, almost viscous, as if the entire room was caught between breaths. Passengers who had been pretending not to listen now openly turned in their seats. A man paused mid-sentence on his phone call. A woman lowered her hardcover book ever so slightly, using it as a shield to hide her curiosity. Even the quiet hum of the aircraft's ventilation seemed to soften. Ryan Alden, the young flight attendant, stood frozen between Liana and Maggie, his face pale with the dread of someone caught in the headlights of a moving train. He swallowed hard. "Ma'am, I really don't think we need to escalate this," he whispered, his voice wobbling. Liana didn't blink. She didn't raise her tone. She simply repeated, "Please, call the cabin manager." Her voice was quiet, but something in it, a calm authority, cut through the air like a clean blade. Ryan hesitated again, visibly torn. He looked at Maggie, clearly intimidated, then at Liana, who stood still and resolute. He took a shaky breath. "I'll get her." He stepped away quickly, almost gratefully, walking toward the galley, with the posture of a man fleeing a small fire before it became a larger one. Maggie sat back in seat 1A and crossed her arms triumphantly. "This is unnecessary," she said loudly, addressing the passengers as though they were her personal audience. "People make mistakes. She's making this into a spectacle." Liana didn't reply. She didn't trust herself to, not because she was losing control, but because she wasn't willing to give Maggie the emotional reaction she clearly wanted. She inhaled calmly, exhaled slowly, a steady rhythm, but her fingers tightened around the strap of her backpack. Inside her chest, that familiar conflict churned, not fear, not rage, but a deeper ache, one that came from a lifetime of being told to stay calm when wrong, to avoid trouble, to be gracious, to not make people uncomfortable. Her mother's voice whispered in her memory, "You don't have to raise your voice to raise the truth." Only seconds later, someone appeared from the front galley. A woman in her late 40s, tall, with short, sandy hair tucked behind her ears. She wore the Navy uniform of Sky America's senior cabin leadership, with a poise that left no doubt of her authority. Captain Olivia Grant was right behind her, unexpected but telling. Liana felt a small jolt of surprise. It wasn't normal for a captain to leave the cockpit during boarding unless the situation was serious. The senior attendant stepped forward first. "Good morning, I'm Sarah Pierce, cabin manager for this flight. I understand there's a seating issue." Before Liana could speak, Maggie jumped in. "Oh, thank goodness you're here," she declared, dramatically pressing a hand to her chest. "This young woman is causing a fuss because she wants me to move seats. I'm already settled. I have back problems, and frankly, this whole fuss is—" "Stop." The word came from Captain Olivia Grant, not Maggie. The entire cabin stilled. Olivia stepped forward, her voice calm, even, but carrying the weight of a person who had commanded storms, engines, and lives at 35000 feet. "Before anyone says another word," the captain said, "I want to hear from the passenger assigned to 1A. Her gaze shifted to Liana. Direct, steady, respectful. Liana felt something loosen inside her chest, a small, quiet relief. "Thank you, Captain," she said softly. She held out her boarding pass. "My seat is 1A. When I arrived, someone else was sitting in it. I asked politely for her to check her ticket. It says 1B. She refused to move." Sarah Pierce took Liana's pass, verified it, then turned to Maggie. "Miss Rowland, may I see your boarding pass, please?" Maggie's expression hardened. "This is absurd," she snapped. "I told the other attendant there must be a system error. And I always sit at the window." "That wasn't my question," Sarah replied, her tone steady. Maggie huffed dramatically, digging through her designer tote and handing over her boarding pass with a sharp flick of her wrist. Sarah looked at it. Her face didn't change. Her voice remained flat. "Your seat is 1B. Maggie crossed her arms tightly. "Well, I'm not moving." A faint murmur rippled across the cabin. Passengers exchanged looks, some incredulous, some embarrassed for her, some quietly bracing for more drama. Captain Grant took a slow step forward, her voice firm. "Miss Rowland, this is not optional. You are required to sit in the seat assigned to you." "I told you I have back issues," Maggie snapped. Olivia raised an eyebrow. "If you have a medical condition requiring accommodation, you should have arranged that with the airline in advance." "Did you?" Maggie's jaw clenched. "Well, no," but Olivia cut in gently but decisively. "Then, your assigned seat remains 1B. Maggie's face flushed an angry red. "This is ridiculous. I'm a Diamond Elite member. I spend a fortune with Sky America. You should be doing everything possible to accommodate me. And I am doing exactly that." Olivia replied. I am accommodating the safety, fairness, and dignity of all passengers, including the one whose seat you are occupying. The room buzzed this time with an unspoken shift, a respect, an alignment, a small storm turning its winds toward justice. Maggie's lips trembled with rage. This entire thing is her fault, she spat, stabbing a finger in Liana's direction. She's being dramatic. She should know how these things go. People like her. Stop. The captain's voice cracked like a whip-sharp cold final. Several passengers inhaled sharply at once. Olivia's eyes were steel. Miss Rowland, she said slowly, any further inappropriate language toward another passenger, especially discriminatory language, will result in immediate removal from this aircraft. Silence. Heavy. Absolute. Maggie opened her mouth, but nothing came out. Her arrogance had collided with something immovable, and for the first time uncertainty flickered across her face. Sarah Pierce stepped in again. Miss Rowland, you have two options. Move to your assigned seat now, or exit the aircraft. The ultimatum hung in the air like a suspended blade. Passengers leaned in. Liana remained still. Maggie trembled, rage, humiliation, entitlement warring behind her eyes. Finally, she hissed, fine. She grabbed her handbag with jerky movements and slid angrily into seat 1B. As she did, she muttered under her breath, this is why priority cabins are losing their standards. But Olivia heard. So did Sarah. And so did Liana. The cabin manager's voice was calm but cutting. This is your final warning, Miss Rowland. Maggie fell silent. Liana exhaled slowly. Not triumph, not relief, just breath. A breath she felt she had been holding since she boarded. Sarah turned to Liana. Miss Mercer, we apologize for the inconvenience, she said sincerely. Please take your seat. Liana nodded, her voice soft. Thank you. She stepped into her sweet seat 1A and slowly placed her backpack under the console. Her hands trembled slightly despite her calm expression. She sat down, carefully breathing and grounding herself, not because she doubted her stance, but because she needed to reclaim her own equilibrium. Captain Grant leaned close enough for only Liana to hear. You handled that with remarkable composure. Liana offered a faint smile. I'm used to situations like this. Olivia's eyes softened with something like sorrow. You shouldn't have to be. And then she stepped away, leaving Liana with a strange mix of gratitude and exhaustion. Passengers continued boarding. The cabin slowly filled with the sounds of seatbelts clicking overhead, bins closing, flight announcements drifting through the speakers. But underneath it all, attention still hummed. Because something told Liana this was not over. Not even close. Boarding for Flight SA-227 continued, but the mood inside first class had shifted. Something electric lingered in the air, an unspoken awareness, a tension balancing between simmering and breaking. Liana sat silently in seat 1, her hands folded neatly in her lap. Outwardly, she looked composed, her posture relaxed, her breathing steady. But inside, her thoughts moved like quiet waves pushing against old memories she didn't want to revisit. She reminded herself why she was here. She reminded herself of Chicago. She reminded herself of the meeting. She reminded herself of everything she'd worked for. You have a job to do today, she told herself. Focus. Stay calm. Stay steady. But it was hard to steady yourself in a room that still shook with someone else's entitlement. Across the aisle, Maggie Rowland shifted loudly in seat 1B, rearranging her handbag, tugging at her blazer, sighing in exaggerated frustration. She wanted attention. She wanted sympathy. But the passengers nearby had grown quieter, more cautious. People had heard what she said. People had seen the captain step in. People understood some more fully than others that a line had been crossed. Still, Maggie muttered under her breath, not as boldly as before, but with enough venom that Liana heard pieces of it. Ridiculous. Window seat, always mine. People making a scene. Back problems, not that anyone cares. Liana stared at the screen in front of her, trying to make herself small even though she knew she disdained. Shouldn't have to. She inhaled slowly, letting the air fill her chest, then exhaled, grounding herself. Her father used to tell her, the world can't shake you unless you let it grab the edges of you. She unclenched her fists. Passengers shuffled into their rows. A few glanced her way with quiet empathy small nods of solidarity. She didn't nod back. She didn't trust her emotions enough yet, but she felt their presence. It helped. For a moment it seemed like the worst had passed. But people like Maggie Rowland rarely let anything go. As Ryan Alden, the young attendant, passed through the aisle closing overhead bins, Maggie leaned slightly toward him, and then she whispered something Liana wasn't meant to hear. But Liana did hear it, clear as morning air. These people always play the victim card. If she wants special treatment, she should pay for it instead of pretending. Ryan stiffened. He didn't respond. He didn't challenge her. He just nodded awkwardly and moved on, discomfort etched into his face. But Liana felt something inside her chest fall and hit the floor. Not loudly, not dramatically, just quietly. A soft breaking, a tired one. She closed her eyes. Not today, she pleaded silently. Please, not today. She took a breath, and the breath shook, not from fear, but from exhaustion, the kind only a lifetime of these moments could create. She forced her eyes open and looked out the window, searching for the sky, searching for calm. But all she saw were fuel trucks and baggage carts, and the hard, flat concrete of the Dallas runway. No sky. Not yet. Her throat tightened. Across the aisle, Maggie continued her quiet tirade, directing comments to no one and everyone at the same time. Just walk in here like she owns the place. First class costs money, back where she belongs. A passenger in row 2 shifted uncomfortably. A woman in row 3 frowned openly. Someone whispered, "That's not okay." But nobody intervened, because that's how these moments often went. People recognized the wrongness quietly, privately, but kept their distance. They didn't want trouble, didn't want to be involved, didn't want conflict. Liana understood. She didn't blame them, but she also didn't deserve this. Ryan approached Liana's seat with a hesitant expression. "Ma'am, can I bring you water or something to make you more comfortable?" She shook her head gently. "No, thank you." Her voice was softer than she intended. Ryan swallowed. "Listen, I'm sorry about earlier. I thought moving you would be easier. For everyone." Liana looked up at him, her gaze steady but tired. Easier for whom, she asked. He opened his mouth, closed it, looked away. "I'm sorry," he whispered again. "I didn't mean." "I know," Liana said, "but it still mattered." He nodded, ashamed, and stepped away quietly. Before he could reach the galley, Captain Olivia Grant reappeared from the cockpit, moving through the aisle with controlled purpose. The cabin hushed slightly as people noticed her presence. She approached Ryan first, speaking in low, firm tones that Liana couldn't hear, but she could see the tension in the captain's jaw and the shrinking posture of the young attendant. Then Olivia turned toward Liana. Her voice lowered, warm but grave. "Miss Mercer, I need to confirm something with you." Liana glanced up, bracing herself. "Of course." The captain hesitated just long enough for the moment to grow heavy. "One of your fellow passengers has used language that violates Sky America's anti-discrimination code," Olivia said. "Multiple times. Is that correct?" Liana's pulse tapped lightly at her wrist. "Yes," she answered quietly. "She has." Olivia exhaled slowly, like someone preparing to do something unpleasant yet necessary. "That's what I needed to know." She placed a gentle hand on the headrest beside Liana. "You did nothing wrong," the captain murmured. "And you've handled this with dignity most people twice your age don't have." Liana said nothing. She didn't trust her voice. Olivia gave a small, reassuring nod and stepped toward Maggie Rowland. Maggie looked up, surprised and slightly triumphant, as if expecting the captain to appease her. But Olivia's expression was different now. Colder, sharper, decided. "Miss Rowland," she said clearly, "I need you to come with me." Passengers nearby looked up in startled unison. Maggie blinked. "Excuse me, please stand," Olivia said. "We need to speak privately." Maggie scoffed. "Oh, now you want to talk." After all, the chaos she caused, Olivia's voice didn't rise. "It didn't need to. This is your final warning. You need to come with me." Maggie bristled. "Absolutely not. I'm staying in my seat. I paid for first class. I have status. I'm not going anywhere." Olivia's eyes hardened. "Then I'll have to make this formal." She stepped back just enough to signal toward the galley. Within seconds, 2 Sky America ground security officers appeared at the front of the cabin. Gasps spread through the rows. Someone whispered, "Oh my God." Someone else murmured, "Is she being removed?" But Maggie laughed shrill, disbelieving. "You can't possibly be serious," she barked. Over what a seat her feelings, "This is outrageous." Olivia remained unmoving. "This is not about a seat," she said calmly. "This is about conduct and safety and the dignity of every passenger on this aircraft." Then she added, voice cool as steel, "And right now, Miss Roland, you are the safety issue." A ripple of shock swept through the cabin. Maggie went very still, then very red. "You'll regret this," she hissed. "I know the CEO of Sky America personally." Olivia didn't blink. "So does Miss Mercer." The cabin froze. Even Maggie froze. A beat of stunned silence filled the room. Liana's stomach tightened. She didn't want the attention. She didn't want her position revealed. But the captain had spoken truthfully and firmly enough to end the argument. Maggie sputtered. "That's impossible," but Olivia cut her off. "You will step off this aircraft voluntarily," she said, "or security will escort you." Maggie's rage trembled across her body. And then, she made the worst choice possible. She pointed at Liana with a shaking, furious finger and spat. "This is because of her. People like her always get special treatment. They're always playing the stop." The captain's voice cracked like lightning. Passengers flinched. One of the security officers stepped forward. "That's enough," he said. "Ma'am, you're coming with us." At that moment, everyone knew. There was no turning back. And Liana. Liana sat still, hands trembling ever so slightly. Not because she feared Maggie, but because she knew something much bigger had just been set in motion. For a long, suspended moment, no one moved. The first-class cabin, normally a soft blend of polite conversation, the rustle of newspapers, and the muted chime of boarding announcements, had gone utterly silent. Even the soft ambient music playing through the speakers seemed to dim under the weight of what had just happened. Maggie Rowland stood trembling in the aisle, her face flushed, her chin lifted in defiant outrage. Captain Olivia Grant stood in front of her, unyielding hands clasped firmly behind her back. Two Sky America security officers waited beside the galley door, their presence calm but unmistakably authoritative. And Liana sat in seat 1, her heartbeat steady but heavy, her hands folded tightly together, her breath tucked carefully behind her ribs as if afraid to disturb the fragile air. This wasn't the kind of moment she wanted, not the kind of attention she invited, not the kind of scene she ever wished to be in the center of. But here she was. Against every hope she had of a simple morning, the day had unfolded differently, sharper, louder, heavier. And all she could do was sit still and witness what her calm refusal had set into motion. Maggie pointed again, finger trembling with fury. "This is insane," she hissed, voice cracking. "You're removing me because of her. Because she cried unfair. Because she played whatever card she thought would get her. That's enough." Olivia didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. Her tone alone drew a line in the air, clean and final. "Miss Roland," the captain repeated, "you are being removed for violating our conduct policy. Your remarks were discriminatory and unacceptable. Your refusal to comply with seating instructions created a safety concern." Maggie laughed bitterly. "Oh, please. Like she's so delicate she can't handle a few words." Olivia's jaw tightened. "This isn't about delicacy. It's about respect, safety, and federal aviation compliance. You have violated all three." Gasps fluttered through the cabin. Passengers exchanged tense, stunned looks. Someone muttered, "Wow." Another whispered, "I've never seen this happen before." But no one spoke loudly enough to break the spell of the moment. The security officer stepped forward. "Ma'am, it's time to go." Maggie recoiled. "I'm not going anywhere. I have a presentation in Chicago. I have a driver waiting. I have your travel plans," Olivia said calmly, "are no longer our responsibility. Please deplane." Maggie's voice pitched up. "I paid for first class in Sky America," Olivia replied, "reserves the right to deny boarding to any passenger whose behavior endangers the comfort or safety of others." Liana watched the exchange, the tension, the raw indignation, twisting Maggie's features, the firmness in Olivia's posture. It felt surreal, unreal, almost to see someone else stand up in ways she had spent years doing for herself. But it also felt heavy. Too heavy. Because she knew this wasn't just about one rude woman. It never was. It was about something older, something deeper, something painful that she was tired of naming. Maggie spun toward her again. You started this, she accused. You could have moved. You could have let it go. But no, you had to make a whole scene. Liana's lips parted, but she didn't speak. Not because she lacked words, but because she feared that if she spoke now it would crack something inside her she wasn't ready to let spill. Olivia stepped between them, blocking Maggie's line of sight. Don't address her again, the captain warned. Maggie's look turned venomous. This is ridiculous. You'll regret this. I'll make sure Sky America hears about it. Olivia gave a small, almost pitying smile. They will. I'll be filing the report myself. The officer took Maggie's arm, only lightly formally. Ma'am, please. Something in Maggie's posture fractured. Her rage twisted into something closer to panic. Her breaths came sharp fast. No. No, I'm not getting off this plane. You can't do this. You don't know who I am. Olivia shook her head slowly. I know enough. The officer guided her gently, but firmly toward the front of the cabin. And finally Maggie realized she had lost. Her voice broke into a desperate hoarse whisper. This isn't fair. This isn't how things work for me. But fairness had never been the rule she lived by. Just privilege. And privilege had limits, one she was discovering far too late. Passengers watched as she was escorted off, silent, some sympathetic, some stone-faced, many uncomfortable. Liana kept her gaze down. She didn't want to watch someone unravel, even someone who had inflicted so many cuts on her that morning. But she heard Maggie's heels clack down the aisle. She heard the security officer's low instructions. She heard the final angry sob Maggie tried to swallow. And then she heard the door open. A pause, a breath, and close. Silence followed, thick, heavy, suffocating. Liana let out a slow breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. Ryan Alden stood a little way back, pale and shaken clearly, replaying every decision he'd made and every one he should have made differently. Sarah Pierce, the cabin manager, stood at the front of the cabin with her hands clasped tightly behind her back, her expression steady but somber. Olivia lingered for another moment. She stepped closer to Liana's seat and lowered her voice. Miss Mercer, she said softly, I'm sorry this happened on my aircraft. Liana forced a faint, tight smile. You don't need to apologize for someone else. But I do, Olivia replied. Because you deserved better today. Liana swallowed. Her throat felt tight, too tight. She looked away briefly, trying to collect herself. It's fine, she whispered. But it wasn't. Not really. And Olivia knew it. If there is anything I can do to make the rest of your flight more comfortable, the captain said gently, you just say the word. Liana nodded once. Thank you, Captain. Olivia gave a small respectful nod and returned to the cockpit. As she left, whispers began floating through the cabin, some empathetic, some stunned, some quietly judgmental. She handled that well. I can't believe that woman. Never seen someone get kicked off before. Poor thing. Liana closed her eyes. She didn't want pity. She didn't want whispers. She didn't want to be seen in this way, as the center of a drama she never asked for, as the target of someone else's bitterness, as the reason a flight had been thrown off schedule. She wanted anonymity. She wanted peace. She wanted her morning back. But instead, she had this. She turned her head slowly toward the window and finally saw the sky. A sliver of pale blue. Soft clouds drifting lazily. An openness that gave her breath again. She stared at that sky, letting it soothe the ache in her chest. She whispered inside herself, just get to Chicago. Just get to the meeting. Just get through this day. But deep down, she sensed something else. Something bigger. Something she did not yet understand. Because what had happened wasn't the end of this ordeal. It was only the beginning. The cabin door had barely closed behind the security officers when the tension inside first class began to change shape. The sharpness of confrontation faded, but something else lingered, a quiet, uneasy hum that seeped into the walls, into the air, into the breaths of everyone seated near the front. Liana stayed still in seat 1, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Her pulse was steady now, no longer racing, but that didn't mean she felt calm. If anything, the silence around her felt heavier than the conflict that came before it. Conflicts had volume, but the aftermath had weight. She took a slow breath, let it anchor her, and tried to refocus her mind on what mattered: the Chicago presentation, the committee, the billions at stake, the future of Helios Aerospace Systems. But her thoughts kept drifting back to the scene that had played out only minutes earlier. The humiliation, the whispers, the disbelief on people's faces. The moment Maggie's words cut deeper than anyone else heard. The way Captain Grant stood between them like a wall. She didn't want to think about any of it, but her mind replayed it anyway. Airplanes had always been her sanctuary, her escape, her sky, and today even the sky felt smaller. She rubbed her thumb along the edge of her seat, arm grounding herself. She was trying to mentally reset, to reclaim whatever piece she could salvage from this mess. But then, an announcement broke across the cabin speakers. Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain. We are experiencing a minor delay while ground control finishes documentation related to a passenger removal. Please remain seated. We'll update you shortly. A ripple of murmurs followed. Liana closed her eyes. This was exactly what she didn't need. A delay. Any delay could shrink her already tight window for Chicago. Her presentation was at 2:30 p.m. CST. Her train from O'Hare into downtown Chicago was booked. Her whole day depended on precision, and now her day was slipping out of her control. She exhaled deeply and reached into her backpack for her laptop, thinking maybe work would keep her mind steady. But before she could open it, her phone vibrated. A single name flashed across the screen. Director Benjamin Hartwell. Her breath caught. Director Hartwell wasn't a casual contact. He wasn't a friend. He wasn't a colleague. He was the head of NARA, the National Aeronautics Research Agency. One of the most powerful men in American aviation, and a man who did not call lightly. Liana quickly swiped to answer. Dr. Mercer came his deep, measured voice, a voice she'd heard only in high-level briefings and collaborations. Are you airborne yet? Liana swallowed. No, sir. There's been a delay. She tried to keep her tone neutral, professional. But her voice trembled slightly just once before she steadied it. There was a brief silence on the line. Hartwell was the kind of man who could hear things that weren't spoken. What happened? He asked quietly. Liana hesitated. She didn't want to sound like she was complaining. She didn't want to sound emotional. She didn't want to sound weak. There was an altercation, she admitted. Altercation. Hartwell's voice sharp and subtle, but unmistakable. Liana inhaled and forced herself to summarize. A passenger refused to move from my assigned seat. There were some remarks. The cabin crew had to intervene. Another silence. Then Hartwell exhaled slowly. That's not acceptable. It's fine, Liana said softly, though she knew it wasn't. The situation was resolved. She was removed. Hartwell paused again. How long is the delay? They're finishing paperwork, Liana replied. Captain Grant hasn't given an estimate. A deep, low hum came through the phone. Liana knew that sound. It was the sound Hartwell made when something needed to be fixed immediately. Dr. Mercer, he said, finally, you cannot be late today. The committee is ready. The representatives flew in last night. Investors are waiting. Do you understand how crucial your arrival is? She closed her eyes. Yes, she whispered. I do. Hartwell's voice softened, a rare thing. You should never have been put in a position where your travel was compromised by someone else's bias. Liana's throat tightened. Director. Really, it's okay. It isn't, he interrupted gently. Not for someone of your position, and not for what you represent. Her heartbeat stilled. She didn't like being told she represented something bigger. It felt like weight she didn't ask for, but weight she carried nonetheless. The phone was silent for a moment. Then Hartwell spoke again, his voice quiet but resolute. I will speak with Sky America Corporate. This won't happen again. Liana's stomach dropped. Director, please don't do that, she said quickly. I don't want to cause trouble for the crew. Captain Grant handled things correctly. There was a soft chuckle, low and knowing. Dr. Mercer, you're not causing trouble. You're correcting a culture. She swallowed hard. But I don't want anyone punished because of me. They won't be punished. A beat, but they will be educated. Liana leaned back in her seat. She didn't know what to say. She didn't know how to feel. Finally, Hartwell added, I'll stay on standby until you're airborne. Message me the moment the wheels leave the ground. Yes, sir. And Liana, his voice softened, almost fatherly. Hold steady. People like you walk ahead, so others have a clearer path. Her eyes burned unexpectedly. She blinked them clear. Thank you, she whispered. The call ended. She sat there, phone still in her hand, staring at the muted reflection of her own face in the dark screen. A clearer path. A bigger weight. She wondered if her parents ever imagined moments like this when they worked late shifts, when they scraped coins into jars for gas, when they told her stories about the sky. She wondered if they knew how many rooms would try to push her out, how many times she would refuse to move. Then, another voice interrupted her thoughts. Miss Mercer. Liana looked up. It was Sarah Pierce, the cabin manager. Her expression was gentler, now, less formal, more human. I just wanted to let you know, Sarah said softly, the captain is requesting priority clearance for departure. We'll be pushing back soon. Liana nodded relief, washing through her chest. Thank you, she said. Sarah hesitated. Then added, lips tight as if holding back emotion, and I want you to know what you endured today. It wasn't right, and it's not who we want to be as an airline. I'm truly sorry. Liana felt her throat tighten again, but this time for a different reason. She offered a small warm nod. Thank you, Sarah. Sarah smiled and moved back to the front. The cabin settled again. The weight in the air thinned just a little. Liana slowly opened her laptop, but before she could start typing, someone across the aisle whispered, "She handled that with more grace than I would have." Liana pretended not to hear, but she felt the words. She felt the truth in them, and she felt something else too. A subtle shift in the cabin. A recognition. A quiet collective understanding. Even if no one said it aloud, the passengers around her saw her now. Not as the woman someone tried to push aside. Not as a problem. Not as an inconvenience. But as someone who stood her ground without raising her voice, without losing her place, without losing herself. And that quiet respect, that was worth something. The engines outside began to hum louder. The sky waited, and Liana, with a steadier breath, waited too. The cabin lights shifted to a warmer tone as Sky America Flight SA-227 finally received clearance to push back from the gate. The sudden gentle rumble beneath the floor signaled the aircraft's movement, and a muted ripple of relief swept through the passengers. People leaned back in their seats, adjusting their belts, settling into the quiet rhythm of travel. For most, the flight was just beginning. For Liana Mercer, it felt like the day was already halfway spent. She watched the curve of the airport terminal through the window. As the plane reversed from the jet bridge, a slow, deliberate motion, like the aircraft itself was exhaling after holding tension for too long. Liana rested her palm against the armrest, steadying her breathing. She felt the exhaustion in her shoulders, not physical but emotional, the kind that lingered long after the noise faded. She reached down, tucked her laptop into the seat pocket for a moment, and took another breath. Today wasn't supposed to be like this. She had planned everything with surgical precision. Nothing chaotic, nothing unpredictable, nothing unnecessary. Yet, life had a way of breaking into even the most carefully drawn plans. A soft rustle beside her broke her thoughts. Captain Olivia Grant stepped into the cabin again, moving quietly so as not to draw unnecessary attention. She approached Liana's seat with a kind of weighted purpose, like she carried something she needed to say but wasn't sure how to begin. "Miss Mercer," she said gently. Liana looked up, surprised to see the captain again. "Yes," Captain Olivia exhaled. For a moment she seemed almost human, not just a uniform with authority. "I wanted to tell you before we take off," she said, lowering her voice so others couldn't hear. "I've submitted a formal report about the incident. Not just the passenger's behavior, but the initial mishandling." Liana blinked. She hadn't expected that. "You didn't have to do that," she said quietly. Olivia gave a small, sad smile. "Yes, I did." She shifted her weight, choosing her next words carefully. "I've flown for 22 years, she continued. "I've seen a lot: storms, mechanical issues, medical emergencies, unruly passengers. But this," she paused, "this felt different. It felt personal." Liana swallowed. "It happens more often than you think," she said softly. Olivia's jaw tightened. "It shouldn't," she said firmly. A silence lingered between them, gentle but heavy with unspoken truth. The captain straightened, clearing her throat. "I just wanted you to hear it from me. We're not sweeping this away. We're not ignoring it. And I'll make sure our crew is better after today. That's my responsibility." Liana felt something warm settle inside her chest, unexpected gratitude. "Thank you, Captain," she said. "Truly." Olivia nodded once, then returned to the cockpit, closing the reinforced door behind her. Liana leaned back, letting the moment wash over her. The plane began to taxi, the engines humming louder as they rolled toward the runway. Across the aisle, a middle-aged woman with dark curly hair glanced over at Liana. She had watched the entire exchange with quiet interest. Liana caught her eye, and the woman offered a small, sympathetic smile. "It takes a lot of grace to handle what you handled," the woman whispered. Liana wasn't used to compliments, especially from strangers. But she nodded politely. "Thank you," she murmured. The woman's eyes softened. "You didn't deserve any of that." Liana's gaze dropped to her hands. Hands that built satellites, coded flight systems, designed algorithms complex enough to reshape aviation. Yet, those same hands had trembled earlier when a stranger questioned her place in a seat she paid for. It was a reminder she hated, a reminder she lived with. The engines grew louder, vibrating through the frame of the aircraft. The flight attendants took their jump seats, buckling in. The announcements faded into background noise. Liana pressed her head gently against the seat back and closed her eyes. The aircraft turned onto the runway. The familiar pause before acceleration. The quiet breath before ascent felt like a metaphor she didn't ask for. Then the plane surged forward. The force pushed her gently into her seat as the wheels lifted off the ground. Dallas sprawled beneath her, shrinking into a quilt of concrete and highways. She always felt something during takeoff, something almost sacred, as if the sky was reminding her she still belonged. Her phone now in airplane mode, connected to the onboard Wi-Fi. A flood of notifications appeared. Emails, calendar alerts, documents from her Chicago team prepping for her arrival. She willed herself into focus. But then an unexpected message appeared. A single text. From Director Benjamin Hartwell. "I've spoken with Sky America Executive Operations. Expect a follow-up call after landing. Focus on your meeting. I'll handle the rest." Liana pressed her lips together. She appreciated Hartwell's support. She truly did. But the idea of becoming the center of a corporate controversy made her stomach knot. She didn't want headlines. She didn't want public statements. She didn't want to be a symbol again. She just wanted to do her work. Her sky, her field, her mission. A soft chime interrupted her thoughts. Ryan Alden, the flight attendant, stood a respectful distance away, his posture straighter than earlier, his expression more genuine. "Miss Mercer," he said quietly, "I just wanted to apologize personally." Liana looked up. Ryan's voice wavered slightly. He swallowed. "I realized I made the wrong call earlier. I was trying to keep the cabin calm, and I thought moving you would be the easiest solution." He looked down at his shoes, ashamed. "But it wasn't fair. And it wasn't right. I didn't treat you the way I should have." Liana studied him carefully. He wasn't making excuses. He wasn't deflecting. He wasn't hiding. He looked like a man who had learned something the hard way. She softened. "I appreciate your apology, Ryan," she said gently. "And I understand you were under pressure." He looked up surprised. "You're not angry," she offered a small, warm smile. "I'm human," she said. "I was hurt, but anger doesn't get us far. What matters is what we do better next time." Ryan nodded, slowly, relief in his shoulders. "I promise I will," he said. "This was a wake-up call for me." Liana nodded once. "Good," she said softly. "That's all anyone can ask." He gave her a grateful smile, then stepped away to resume his duties. As Liana turned back to her window, she let out a long, quiet exhale. Maybe today wouldn't break her rhythm after all. Maybe she could still reclaim the peace she sought when the morning began. The plane reached cruising altitude, the seatbelt light dimmed, and the hum of the engine smoothed into a steady lull. For the first time since she boarded, Liana opened her laptop fully and allowed the familiar blue glow to settle across her face. Charts, simulations, flight path projections. Her world, her language. She began to review her slides, making subtle edits, clarifying key data points, reinforcing the narrative she'd crafted, one that could shift the future of American aviation. As she worked, something unexpected happened. Her breath eased. Her shoulders relaxed. Her posture straightened. She wasn't escaping the earlier pain. She was reclaiming herself after it. The sky outside the window burned gold as the aircraft cut through clouds. Light streaked across her face, illuminating her expression, focused, calm, and quietly fierce. It was a version of herself she trusted, the version no one could take from her. Not even a stranger who thought she didn't belong in seat 1A. The steady hum of the engine softened into a gentle background vibration as Sky America 227 leveled off at cruising altitude. The cabin lights dimmed slightly, giving the aircraft the warm, muted glow of early morning calm, even though the sun was now high above the clouds. But inside Liana Mercer's chest, calm was still something she had to coax back bit by bit, breath by breath. She adjusted her laptop screen and began scrolling through her presentation outline. Each slide felt familiar, almost comforting numbers and data points she had lived with, engineered, refined over years. Her algorithms were steady, her projections precise, her innovations solid. It was everything outside her work that felt unstable. She kept revisiting the moment in the boarding area, replaying it unintentionally in the disbelief in Maggie Rowland's expression. When she saw her sitting in 1A, the quiet venom in the remarks, the tension spiraling until something snapped. She hated that she remembered every detail. She hated how it lingered in the air like stale smoke. But what she hated most was how it made her feel. Small, even for a moment. Out of place, even though she knew better. Vulnerable, even though she built her life on strength. She touched her forehead, lightly massaging the small knot forming there. Then, a soft tap echoed near her armrest. She looked up. Across the aisle, a man in his 40s, quiet, clean-shaven, wearing a blue business jacket, offered an apologetic smile. He had been watching her on and off since boarding resumed, but not in the invasive way she had grown used to. More in the way people look when they're carrying something unsaid. "Apologies," he whispered. "I didn't want to interrupt. Just wanted to say what happened earlier. It wasn't right. And I'm sorry you had to go through that in front of everyone." Liana blinked, surprised. She wasn't used to strangers offering kindness. Not unprompted, not gently. "Thank you," she said quietly. He nodded and went back to his seat, offering nothing more, asking for nothing more. It was small, but meaningful, and somehow that made her throat tighten again. The goodness of strangers could disarm her faster than cruelty ever did. She returned to her laptop, reading lines she'd already memorized, but her mind drifted. Her body had left the ground, but her thoughts were still navigating turbulence. She glanced at her reflection in the darkened corner of the screen, just faint enough to see the outline of her face. She saw strength, yes, but also fatigue, and questions she rarely let herself ask. Why does someone always test my place? Why does the world still measure people like me twice before allowing us once? Why do I have to be composed every time someone else loses control? Why do I always carry the burden of being an example? Her chest ached. She shut her laptop slowly, allowing herself a rare moment to simply breathe. Then, a small flicker of movement caught her eye. Ryan Alden, the young flight attendant from before, approached with a tray, this time moving with deliberate care, making sure not to invade her space. "Miss Mercer," he said softly, "I brought you some herbal tea, chamomile and mint. I thought it might help you relax." Liana hesitated, then accepted it with a soft nod. "Thank you, Ryan." He looked relieved, grateful, even. He lingered only a moment longer, and, for what it's worth, he murmured, "The way you stayed calm earlier. Not many people could have done that. I'm still thinking about it." She offered a gentle smile. "Staying calm doesn't always mean I'm not hurting," she said quietly. Ryan's eyes softened with genuine empathy. "I understand," he whispered. Then he stepped away, leaving her with a warm cup and a silence that felt a little less heavy. Liana wrapped her hands around the tea, letting the warmth seep into her fingers. It reminded her of her mother Monica brewing tea late at night, when bills piled up, when decisions loomed, when life felt too sharp and too loud. Her mother's voice drifted through her memory now. "Breathe when the world demands your anger. Rise when they expect you to fall. But don't let the rising steal your softness, baby girl." Liana closed her eyes. Softness. She had so little room for it, but she craved it more than she admitted. A chime from her laptop pulled her back. A notification had bypassed the muted settings, a secure message from her Chicago team. "Weather change over Lake Michigan. FAA advisory suggests slight turbulence near descent. Prepare for possible schedule adjustments." Great. Another variable. Another shift in timing. She exhaled slowly and reopened her laptop, entering a sequence of commands. Her predictive modeling software bloomed across her screen. colored wind vectors, atmospheric density readings, probability grids. Her fingers began to move without hesitation. It was instinctive, therapeutic, her mind's way of regaining control. As she evaluated descent paths and time buffers, she didn't notice someone approaching until a shadow fell lightly across her screen. Sarah Pierce stood beside her, hands clasped. "Miss Mercer," she said gently, "may I speak with you for a moment?" Privately, Liana blinked in surprise but nodded. Sarah lowered her voice to a whisper. "I just received a message from corporate." Liana's stomach tightened. "What kind of message?" Sarah hesitated. "Not a disciplinary one. More like a directive, a request. From the executive operations team." Liana's pulse quickened. This was exactly what she feared. "What did they say?" she asked cautiously. Sarah inhaled deeply. "They asked me to convey their personal apology. And—" she paused, searching for the right words. "They asked if you'd be willing to speak with them after the flight. They want to understand what went wrong today with the goal of improving procedures." Liana's chest tightened, not with fear, but with a complex blend of responsibility and exhaustion. She'd lived this cycle before. A wound, an apology, a request to help fix the system she didn't break. "What would you like me to tell them?" Sarah asked softly. Liana looked down at her hands. Hands steady. Hands built for solving problems. Hands that sometimes wished they didn't have to fix everything. But she thought of her younger self, of every girl who looked like her, of every seat she fought for, not just to keep, but to open for someone else. She took a slow breath. "Tell them," she whispered, "I'll talk after my meeting in Chicago." Sarah nodded, gratitude easing her expression. "Of course," she said. "Thank you." As Sarah stepped away, Liana stared out the window again. The clouds spread beneath the aircraft like a soft, endless ocean. She wondered how many people below them were carrying invisible battles of their own. She wondered how many fought them quietly. How many rose anyway? Her laptop chimed again. Another weather update. Another calculation needed. She leaned forward, determined to get back on track. But then, the seatbelt light flicked on. A light tremor passed through the plane, barely noticeable, but enough to cause a few heads to lift. A voice came over the speakers. "This is your captain. We're heading into a patch of mild turbulence. Please remain seated." Liana took a slow breath, steadying herself, and turned toward the window. Clouds flickered white against the sun, shifting in uneven layers. She realized something. All day, she had been navigating one form of turbulence after another, emotional, social, professional. But this was the kind she understood. Predictable, mapped, calculated. She closed her eyes and whispered inside herself, "This turbulence I can ride. The rest, I will overcome." And for the first time since she boarded the plane, she believed it. The turbulence eased after a few minutes, just as Captain Olivia Grant had promised, and the aircraft settled again into its smooth, quiet glide across the sky. Passengers returned to their books, their screens, their thoughts. The cabin regained its soft hum of normalcy. But for Liana Mercer, nothing about this day felt normal. She tried to refocus on her work, scrolling through her simulations with renewed concentration. Yet, every few minutes her thoughts drifted back to the boarding gate, back to Maggie Rowland's words, back to the ache they left behind. She hated that the moment still lived under her skin. She hated even more that she couldn't simply shrug it off. But she wasn't made of stone. She was human, and today had been a cut, not a scratch. She adjusted her posture, inhaled deeply, and tried to steady her attention. Then, her seat vibrated faintly. A message. A push notification allowed through a secure channel. Her eyes narrowed slightly at the sender. Director Benjamin Hartwell again. She opened it. "Call me the moment you're able." "Urgent." Liana's stomach tightened. "Urgent? What could possibly be urgent now?" She looked around the cabin, quiet, calm, settled. She didn't want to draw attention to herself, didn't want more eyes watching her, didn't want to become the center of yet another moment. But she couldn't ignore Hartwell. She switched to a secure audio line and raised the phone to her ear. "Director Hartwell," she whispered. His voice came through low, sharp, and clipped, different from earlier. "Liana, I just received a situation report from Sky America Corporate." Her pulse quickened. What kind of report? Another silence. The kind that told her she wasn't going to like the answer. "They flagged the incident during boarding," he said. "It made its way into the internal chain, and someone leaked it. Liana's heart dropped. Leaked? What do you mean someone leaked it? Hartwell exhaled heavily. It's circulating on a private aviation forum. Nothing public yet, but these things don't stay contained for long. A cold wave rippled through her. No, she whispered. No, that can't happen. I don't want this out there. I don't want to be turned into a headline. I know, Hartwell said. I'm doing everything in my power to contain it. She closed her eyes tightly. She had fought too hard too long to build a career based on her mind, not on her identity, not on spectacles like this. She didn't want to be the black CEO who... She wanted to be Dr. Liana Mercer, the aerospace innovator. But if the story leaked, it wouldn't matter what she wanted. She forced her voice to steady. What's being said? Hartwell hesitated again. It's vague for now. A VIP passenger mistreated. A discriminatory altercation. A flight grounded due to misconduct. They haven't connected it to you by name, but it's only a matter of time before someone does. Liana pressed a hand to her forehead. Her worst fear becoming a symbol instead of a scientist. We need to stop it, she said urgently. Please. Before it gets bigger. I'm trying, Hartwell said. But listen to me carefully. His tone shifted, more controlled, more deliberate. Once you land in Chicago, Sky America's CEO will want to speak with you. Liana's eyes widened. Why? To apologize. Personally. And to ensure they have your version documented before anything hits the public sphere. Liana exhaled shakily. I don't want publicity, she murmured. I don't want attention. I don't want to be dragged into anything political or racial or performative, not today. Not ever. Hartwell's voice softened. I know that, and I respect that. But you can't always choose when the world decides to look. She clenched her jaw. I didn't ask for this, she whispered. I know, he replied. But you handled yourself with grace this morning. That matters. And it's going to matter even more if this story spreads. Liana leaned her head back, staring at the ceiling, breathing through the thick knot forming in her chest. Do you want advice? Hartwell asked. She nodded even though he couldn't see her. Yes, she whispered. Please. Then hear me clearly, he said. You cannot shrink yourself to stay invisible. Not anymore. You're too far in your field. Too important. Too watched. She swallowed hard. You have the right, he continued, to take up the space you earned. Even when someone else tries to push you out of it. Her eyes burned unexpectedly. She blinked fast. And if the story does leak, Hartwell said gently, you won't face it alone. She breathed once, twice, steadying herself again. Thank you, she whispered. Contact me the moment you land, he said firmly. I will. The call ended. She lowered the phone slowly, letting the silence settle over her. Her chest rose and fell irregularly. She felt the weight of the moment, a weight she never asked for, but somehow always found herself carrying. A voice pulled her back. Miss Mercer. It was Captain Olivia Grant, standing beside her seat again. Liana blinked, startled. She hadn't even noticed the cockpit door open. Captain, she replied softly. Olivia leaned closer, speaking quietly. We've just received a message from Sky America headquarters. They're arranging a private escort for you once we land. There will be a representative waiting at the gate. Liana's breath caught. Already, Olivia nodded gently. They're taking this very seriously. Liana looked down at her hands again. Hands that never stopped working, never stopped building, never stopped proving. She whispered, I didn't want this to become something bigger. Olivia's expression softened with empathy. Miss Mercer, sometimes the world chooses its moments. Not us. What matters is how we walk through them. Liana swallowed. I'm just tired of walking through them alone. Olivia's voice lowered. You aren't alone today. Something in Liana's chest loosened slightly, but noticeably. Gratitude flickered across her face before she looked away, unable to hold the captain's kind gaze for long. Olivia stepped back toward the cockpit, but before she turned, she added, And for what it's worth, your composure this morning was extraordinary. Liana nodded faintly. Thank you, Captain. When Olivia disappeared behind the cockpit door, Liana exhaled long and slow, as if releasing air she had held for hours. She stared out the window, watching layers of clouds stretch like sheets of cotton beneath the plane. The sky was vast, wide, open, free, and yet she felt confined by something invisible, something that lingered in her thoughts and her chest heavy and unspoken. She whispered to herself, barely audible, I just wanted to fly. Her fingers trembled slightly, the first crack in her composure all day. She closed her eyes, letting the warmth of the cabin settle around her. The turbulence outside had quieted. But inside, she knew more turbulence was on its way the moment the plane touched down. Still, she would face it. She always did, but she wouldn't pretend it was easy. Not today. The afternoon sun poured in gently through the oval windows, scattering soft gold across Liana Mercer's cheeks. Although the cabin hummed with a deceptive sense of calm, the weight inside her chest made it hard to fully settle. She rested her head against the headrest, eyes half open, watching clouds drift like drifting islands far below. The sky usually soothed her. Today, it felt like a mirror, quiet, expansive, but carrying storms beneath its surface. She tried to focus on the rhythmic thrum of the engines, hoping it would steady her thoughts, and for a moment, it almost worked. She could feel her breathing evening out her shoulders, releasing some of the tension she'd been unknowingly carrying since boarding. But the moment was brief. Her phone vibrated again with a message from her mother. Monica, Mercer, baby, text me when you land. Just want to know you're safe. Liana's throat tightened. She hadn't told her parents anything. She didn't want them worrying. But somehow, her mother always sensed something in the air, some tremor in her daughter's world, even from states away. Liana typed slowly. I'm okay, Mom. On the way to Chicago. She hesitated, thumb hovering over the keyboard before adding, I'll call you after the meeting. She sent it. A simple message, but it anchored her more than she expected. A rustle came from across the aisle. The same middle-aged woman who had spoken earlier, gentle voice, warm eyes, shifted in her seat, glancing over as if deciding whether or not to say something. After a moment, she leaned slightly toward Liana. Can I say something? She asked softly. Liana looked up. Of course. The woman folded her hands in her lap. My name is Ellen, she said, and I just want you to know that what happened today, that wasn't about you. People like Maggie, she paused as if choosing words carefully. They see the world in a way that's shrinking, Ellen finished. And people like you make it bigger. A beat, Liana swallowed. Hard. There it was again, that rare, disarming kindness from strangers. The kind she never expected, but always felt deeply when it came. Thank you, she said quietly. That means more than you know. Ellen nodded, giving her space again. Liana turned back to the window, the light shifting across her face. Part of her wanted to close her eyes. Another part feared that if she closed them now, she might break open. She pressed a hand to her sternum, breathing through the pressure. But then, the quiet ding of an incoming email snapped her out of her thoughts. She opened her laptop, fully expecting to see something related to the Chicago committee. But instead, her stomach sank. The subject line read, Confidential notice came America internal. Her pulse quickened. She clicked. The email was from a Sky America executive assistant circulated internally to upper staff. It read, We have received notice of a discriminatory incident on flight SA-227 involving a VIP passenger. Until further clarification, all staff are advised to withhold public comment. Be prepared for corporate PR involvement. Liana froze. VIP passenger, discriminatory incident, corporate PR. It was happening faster than she feared. Her hands trembled slightly over the keyboard. This wasn't just about her anymore. This wasn't contained. This was moving, and she hated it. She shut the laptop, slowly pressing her palm against the cover, grounding herself. Breathe, she whispered under her breath. Just breathe. But the ache in her chest was growing slow, real, unavoidable. This exact thing was what she had spent years trying to avoid. Becoming the story, becoming an example, becoming a headline instead of a human being. She'd worked so hard to build a life where people saw her for her brilliance, not her identity, not her battles, not the moments she was forced to defend her existence. She rubbed her forehead, closing her eyes for a moment. Then footsteps approached. Not hurried, not loud, just steady. When she looked up, she saw Sarah Pierce, the cabin manager, standing beside her seat, once more, expression softer than before, eyes full of something like empathy. Miss Mercer, Sarah said quietly. Is everything all right? Liana hesitated. Normally, she would say yes. Automatically. Out of habit. But something inside her recognized a rare window of honesty. A moment where she didn't need to carry everything alone. So she breathed out, shakily, meeting Sarah's eyes. I don't want this to turn into something bigger, she confessed. I don't want to be a topic on a forum, or an internal memo, or anything. I just wanted to get to Chicago. Sarah nodded slowly. I understand, she whispered, and I'm so sorry you're in this position. Liana looked back at the window. There's going to be media pressure if it gets out, Sarah continued carefully. Sky America will try to handle it privately at first, but stories like this tend to spread. Liana closed her eyes. I know, she said softly. I just hoped today would be different. Sarah knelt slightly beside her seat so they could speak more quietly. You shouldn't have to be the one carrying this, she said gently. None of this was your fault. And I want you to know the crew, at least those of us who understand what happened, were with you. Not because of your position, but because you deserved better. Liana's voice caught in her throat. She looked at Sarah, trying to find the words. Thank you, she whispered. Really? Sarah nodded, stood, and placed a gentle hand on the seat back. If you need anything at all, tell me. Then she stepped away. And for the first time since the flight began, Liana felt something soften inside her. Not relief, but a faint, fragile thread of reassurance. She sat back. The engines hummed. The clouds drifted. She lifted her hand and pressed her palm lightly to the window, feeling the faint vibration of the wind outside. She whispered to herself, You're okay. You're still here. You're still flying. And somehow that reminder eased the tightness in her chest. Just a little, enough to breathe again, enough to keep going. The cabin lights dimmed as the aircraft began its slow descent toward Chicago O'Hare. Outside the window, the late afternoon sky had changed, no longer soft gold, but a muted slate blue, streaked with thin, trembling clouds moving faster than before. Liana Mercer stared at them, sensing the shift in the air long before the plane felt it. Years of building predictive models did that she could almost read the atmosphere, the way others read a familiar book. A faint tremor ran through the aircraft. Not dangerous, just unsettled. Much like her, Liana closed her laptop, folding it gently and resting her palms on the cover. She'd finished her presentation review, rechecked her notes, even rehearsed key points in her mind. But her focus kept drifting not to the meeting, but to everything swirling around her. She had always been able to compartmentalize. Today, those compartments were leaking. Her phone buzzed again, another message that slipped past airplane mode via the in-flight Wi-Fi. This one was from her assistant Jenna Liu. Jenna, heads up, O'Hare rep contacted us. They're preparing your VIP escort. Also, there's chatter online. Nothing too big yet, but people are connecting dots. Be ready. Liana's stomach tightened. Be ready. She'd been ready her whole life. It never made the moments easier. She set the phone aside and rubbed her forehead. Then someone cleared their throats softly beside her. She looked up to see Ryan Alden standing a careful distance away, holding a bottle of water and a clean napkin, as if he wasn't sure whether approaching her again would be welcome. Miss Mercer, he said gently, we're beginning our descent. Can I get you anything? Water, tea? She offered a small, tired smile. Water's fine. Thank you. He handed it to her, carefully, hand steady, but eyes full of something she recognized, guilt mixed with earnestness. The kind of expression people have when they realize too late the weight of their own choices. Miss Mercer, Ryan began, then hesitated. Can I ask you something? Liana raised an eyebrow slightly. Of course. He swallowed. How? How do you stay so calm? Earlier, when everything was happening, you didn't yell. You didn't panic. You didn't fight back even when she stopped himself. I mean, I don't think I could have handled it the way you did. Liana studied him for a long moment. He wasn't asking out of curiosity. He was asking out of pain. Pain at what he witnessed. Pain at the part he unwittingly played. So she answered him honestly. Sometimes calm isn't calm, she said softly. Sometimes it's survival. Ryan looked at her, really looked, and something shifted in his eyes. A deeper understanding, a quiet recognition. She continued, her voice low. When you grow up, learning that reacting can make things worse, you learn to hold everything inside until you're safe enough to let it out. Ryan nodded, slowly, eyes damp. That's not fair, he murmured. No, she said gently. It isn't. But fairness isn't always promised. Change isn't either. But we can push for it. He swallowed hard. I want to be better, he whispered. You will be, she replied. You already started. He smiled faintly relieved and then stepped away as the cabin intercom clicked on. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Captain Grant. We're beginning our final approach into Chicago O'Hare. Please ensure your seatbelts are fastened. Passengers shifted, tray tables clicked, seat backs straightened. But Liana, she felt her body stiffen rather than relax. Descending meant landing. Landing meant facing whatever waited for her on the ground. The escort, Sky America's executives, possible reporters, and worst of all, the fragile possibility of losing control of her own story. She breathed slowly, deeply, trying to push away the rising anxiety. Then, "Excuse me, Miss Mercer." She turned to see Ellen, the middle-aged woman from across the aisle, leaning slightly toward her again. Liana offered a polite smile. Yes, Ellen's expression was soft but concerned. "Are you all right?" she asked. "You look like you're holding your breath." Liana blinked. "Maybe I am." Ellen gave a sympathetic smile. "Well, for what it's worth, whatever happens today, it won't define you." Liana looked at her eyes searching. "You don't even know me," she said quietly. Ellen nodded. "Maybe not. But I know what it looks like when a woman carries too many expectations on her shoulders. And I know what it looks like when the world demands more of someone than it gives back." Liana felt something tremble inside her. "Just be gentle with yourself," Ellen added softly. Gentle. The word hit harder than it should have. She whispered, "I'll try." Ellen nodded warmly and settled back into her seat. But the plane didn't give her much time to process the exchange because a sudden bump jolted the cabin. Then another. And another. A few passengers gasped. Someone gripped an armrest. Liana's instincts sharpened instantly. This wasn't severe turbulence, but it was the kind that could grow. The aircraft dipped slightly, then steadied. The intercom clicked. "Ladies and gentlemen," Captain Grant said calmly, "we've hit some pockets of unstable air due to shifting wind over Lake Michigan. Please remain seated." Liana understood every word beyond the announcement. Wind shear, temperature differentials, crosswinds affecting approach vectors. Years of designing predictive turbulence assessments meant she could read the situation faster than most pilots. But knowing didn't make the moment feel any lighter. Another tremor. Then a long, uneasy drop. A few people cried out. Liana closed her eyes, inhaling deeply. She trusted planes. She trusted physics. She trusted pilots. But today, her emotional reserve was thin, paper-thin. Then, a warm hand touched her forearm, light and steady. She opened her eyes to see Sarah Pierce crouched beside her seat. "Hey," Sarah whispered gently. "It's all right. This is normal for this approach. Captain Grant has handled far worse. You're safe." Liana hadn't realized her hands were shaking. She placed them slowly on her lap. "Thank you," she said, voice tight. "It's been a long day." Sarah nodded sympathetically. "I know, but you're almost through it." Liana gave a small, exhausted laugh. "I'm not sure what I'm descending into." Sarah offered a warm, reassuring smile. "Maybe something difficult, but maybe something necessary." Liana looked out the window. Chicago's skyline began taking shape beneath the clouds, dark, tall, sharp against the horizon. Home to her meeting, her future, her fight, and perhaps another turning point she didn't ask for. The plane dipped again, then leveled. Liana inhaled. "Okay," she whispered. "Okay." Sarah squeezed her hand once, then stood and buckled into her jump seat. The intercom chimed again. "Cabin crew, prepare for landing." Liana straightened slowly, eyes fixed ahead. Whatever waited for her. The executives, the escort, the questions, the headlines, she would face them. But she would not face them small. She would walk off this plane with her spine straight, her head high, and her truth intact. Even if the world tried to write its own version of her story, she would reclaim it. The plane's wheels lowered with a distant mechanical groan. Liana exhaled. Landing was seconds away, but everything that mattered was still ahead. The wheels struck the runway with a firm, decisive thud. A ripple moved through the aircraft, the familiar shudder of rubber meeting asphalt followed by the smooth, rolling hum of deceleration. Passengers exhaled as the tension lifted. A few clapped softly. Someone whispered, "Thank God." But Liana Mercer didn't move. Her hands rested still on her lap, her breathing slow, steady, controlled. She kept her gaze fixed on the seat in front of her, even as the cabin filled with the relieved chatter of people ready to return to their lives. Because hers wasn't returning to normal once she stepped off this plane. The aircraft slowed, turned, and taxied across the sprawling labyrinth of runways toward the terminal. Chicago's skyline rose in the distance, sharp and blue against the horizon. Her next battlefield, her next obligation, her next truth. She forced a long breath through her nose. She could handle this. She could handle anything, but she didn't have to pretend it was easy. As the plane approached the gate, a soft ding sounded. The intercom clicked. "This is Captain Grant," the warm, steady voice announced. "Welcome to Chicago, O'Hare. For your safety, please remain seated until the seatbelt sign is off. We thank you for flying with Sky America." Liana's heart pounded quietly beneath her calm exterior. The seatbelt sign went dark. People sprang up, reaching for bags, stretching, chatting, reclaiming their ease. But before anyone could step into the aisle, Sarah Pierce, the cabin manager, placed a hand gently on Liana's seat. "Miss Mercer," she whispered, "please remain seated for a moment." Liana nodded, already expecting it. She waited until the last passenger ahead of her formed a line, bags in hand. Her chest tightened, not in fear, but in anticipation. Ryan Alden approached next and stood beside Sarah. His voice soft, his eyes kind. "Thank you for your patience," he said. "And for today, thank you for your grace." She gave him a small, tired smile. Then the cockpit door opened. Captain Olivia Grant stepped out and walked directly to Liana. "Miss Mercer," she said quietly, "your escort is waiting at the gate. When the aisle clears, I'll walk you out." Liana nodded. "Thank you, Captain." The aisle emptied slowly, row by row. The hum of rolling carry-ons faded down the jet bridge. At last, only a few passengers remained. When Ellen reached her row, she paused. "I hope the rest of your day is gentler than the start," Ellen said softly. Liana's eyes warmed. "Thank you," she whispered. "Truly." Ellen gave a tender nod, then stepped away. When the aisle was clear, Captain Grant gestured. "Ready?" Liana inhaled, straightened her shoulders, lifted her chin. "Yes." She stood, slipping her backpack over her shoulder. Sarah and Ryan remained beside her until the last moment, offering quiet support without crowding her. As Liana stepped into the aisle, Captain Grant led the way, her posture proud, protective, as though shielding her from whatever waited outside. The jet bridge door opened. A rush of cool, filtered airport air met Liana's face. And standing there waiting with a stiff, formal posture was a man in a Navy suit, Sky America's regional director, Marcus Hale. He stepped forward immediately. "Dr. Mercer," he said with solemn urgency, "on behalf of Sky America Airlines, I'd like to personally apologize for everything that occurred on Flight SA-227 today." Liana kept her expression composed. "I appreciate the apology," she said evenly. "But what matters now is what happens next." Marcus nodded sharply. "Absolutely. We intend to address this fully. Our corporate PR team requests a brief statement from you, private, not public, so we can move immediately to correct internal failures." Liana's jaw tightened. She hated how fast this was accelerating. "I don't want publicity," she said. "I don't want to be a headline." "You won't be," Marcus assured quickly. "We'll contain it before it reaches public channels. But your voice is important in our internal review." Liana exhaled slowly, steadying herself. "I'll speak with corporate," she said, "after my meeting downtown. Not before." "Of course," he said instantly. "We'll accommodate whatever you need." Captain Grant placed a hand on Liana's shoulder. "Dr. Mercer has a critical meeting. Please allow her a clear path." Marcus nodded, stepping aside. A private security detail waited nearby, ready to escort her through a discreet route out of the airport. But before she could move forward, a voice called softly from behind. "Miss Mercer." She turned. It was Ryan Alden standing just inside the jet bridge, hands folded in front of him. There was no audience now, no pressure, just sincerity. He said quietly, "I want to do better, and I will." Liana looked at him, really looked, and then she nodded once. "I believe you." It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't absolution. It was something more real. A chance. Ryan's shoulders softened with relief. Then Liana turned and stepped forward, following the security team down a quiet side hallway. Her footsteps echoed softly. For a moment, she felt terribly alone, caught between roles she never asked for: the innovator, the symbol, the woman the world kept testing. But then her phone buzzed. A single text. Director Hartwell, whatever happened up there, you handled it with more grace than most leaders I know. Call me after your meeting. We'll strategize next steps. Liana closed her eyes. Not alone. Not entirely. Outside, a black sedan waited, engine-warm driver, holding the door open. She slid into the back seat, exhaling slowly as the door closed. The chaos of the day finally felt distant. Not gone, but manageable. The car pulled away from the airport, merging into the Chicago traffic. Skyscrapers loomed ahead, tall and unshaken. And somewhere inside her, she felt herself steady. Everything she faced today, the disrespect, the humiliation, the weight of being misjudged, had tried to shrink her. But she was still here, still standing, still moving forward. She looked out at the skyline, whispering to herself, "You're allowed to be tired, but you didn't break." Her voice trembled, soft but firm. "And you won't." The city lights shimmered against the windshield. Her meeting awaited. Her future awaited. Her truth awaited. And she would meet all of it, not as the girl in seat one, who was told she didn't belong, but as Dr. Liana Mercer, daughter of Monica and Robert, CEO of Helios Aerospace Systems, a woman who had earned every inch of her sky. She straightened her spine, lifted her chin, and let the weight she carried settle into something else: strength, purpose, and the beginning of a story she would write herself. The car drove on, and Liana watched the city draw closer. Not with fear, not with exhaustion, but with quiet resolve. The sky hadn't defeated her. It had shaped her. And she was ready for whatever waited beyond the next door. In Dr. Liana Mercer's story, we're reminded that dignity is not something others grant us. It's something we carry even when the world tries to strip it away. What happened to her wasn't just a seat dispute. It was a reflection of the quiet battles so many people face every day: being underestimated, being dismissed, being told directly or indirectly that they don't belong. But Liana shows us something powerful. Strength doesn't always roar. Sometimes it sits still, speaks calmly, and refuses to move from the place it has rightfully earned. For older audiences, many of whom have lived through decades of change, this story speaks to a universal truth. Every one of us has faced moments where the world demanded we shrink. Moments where staying quiet seemed easier than standing firm. Moments where respect wasn't given freely but had to be claimed. And yet our choices in those moments define us. Liana didn't shout. She didn't retaliate. She simply held her ground with grace and clarity. And because of that, the entire system around her was forced to confront its own failures. The lesson: stand firm in who you are. Even gently, even quietly, your presence can change a room. And sometimes, choosing yourself is the most powerful act of all. Thank you for spending your time with this story. If it touched something in you, your memories, your sense of justice, or simply your humanity, please like, share, and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps bring more meaningful stories to those who need them.